Okay, fantastic. What are the essential concepts of getting data management maturity sorted out and getting it going, getting the basics right? So this is the sort of playbook that I've put together. The first case is justification, and quite often this step gets missed out. Sometimes because we're already in the game, someone called for an assessment and we start maturing, but we omit to develop the business case and what is our strategy for maturity, and then also the awareness and desire. And sometimes I've seen us getting caught, specifically myself, where I'm trying to train the participants to do a maturity assessment, but they have very little awareness and even less desire. And that always creates problems. Anyone that's done change management, you remember the ADCAR, one should not be trying to train or impart knowledge if there's no awareness and desire. So these are the phases that I go through. Justify why you're doing it, and if you've been told to do it, I would still recommend that you do the justification, because it develops the business value and your understanding of business value, and of course the strategy that you want to play into. The next phase is then preparing it. It's communicating to people, making sure they want to be part of this, making sure we've got the right people, the stakeholders, and then also the scoping and planning. So what is it that we're going to assess? Are we going to assess all knowledge areas? Are we going to assess some of the knowledge areas, some of the activities, all of the activities? And you always find this coming in. It's a case of, oh, shucks, should we be assessing, for example, in the NDMO open data because we haven't started it? Is it going to make us look bad? And then we start getting some emotional issues that creep in. So that's the prepare phase. We then go into the execute phase, where we actually perform the maturity assessment, and it's a little bit more than that. What I like to do is I always like to have some time to review the evidence, almost the artifacts, and that's something that I've certainly noticed several people having misunderstandings where we believe we assessing the maturity of our processes, but we are also assessing the maturity of our work product. And the evidence is related to a work product. It's not so much related to the process, for example, of doing a data maturity assessment. It's related to what's the outcome, what is the readiness, what is the target plan of the assessment. Okay, so please be careful. It's not just the activity that we're performing and how well we're doing the activity. It's also the deliverables. So if someone says, I'm doing really well, I'm at a level 4 or a level 5, it's okay, fantastic. Let me see the evidence. Okay, show me what those documents look like. Do you have a scorecard? Do you have something that makes sense? And then if for some reason they mark themselves too high or too low, you need to adjust the results and then confirm the assessment results with the people, with the business unit, whoever that may be. And then the final step is developing a report. This is what it looks like. These are the recommendations. And then I can certainly recommend the idea of doing a readiness assessment. So are we ready? Do we have the right skills? Do we have the right technology? Do we have the right capabilities to actually reach the target state? Are we ready, or are we ready for the target state? And there's some advice there that I'd love to share with you guys in terms of choosing the target level. So for example, if you had a level 0, please don't choose a target level of 5. You're going to battle to get there. And it's going to take you a lot longer. And then you're going to have the next year when it comes around to do it again, and you're still at a level 0 or 1, you haven't reached your target. So don't jump, maximum don't jump more than a 2. You're happy that you go a 1, but do not jump to a 2 above where you're currently at. So if your current maturity is sitting at a level 1, then go to a 3. If your current maturity is sitting at 0, please don't go to 4 or 5. Okay, so then we'll continually cycle around this prepare, execute, and sustain. And this refresh period, a lot of times it's dependent on the organization, and it can also be dependent on compliance. And I've seen situations where we'd actually redo the assessment every quarter because we headed for a compliance rating at the end of the year, and we actually need to understand the progress. But I'll show you some examples of that as well. Okay, so like any proper architect that's read the Zachman, of course it's why, what, when, where, who, and how. I'm not going to go through all of it, but a lot of the why is justified on what is the current state, what are the problems do we have with the current state. It's also supporting our data strategy. It's looking to increase our maturity upliftment, and then to build the trust. So we do know, for example, the impact of quality. Once we improve the quality and once we improve the maturity, then people are more trusting of the processes and the activities that we perform. So this is a breakdown of all the elements of the core concepts. I'm not going to go through this in detail. If you have any questions, then we'll talk through them. So there is a question now in terms of, have you ever had instances when you're doing a maturity assessment that the participants were aware before you got there and you didn't need to do the training? So in general, the answer has been no, but there are, what I always find that there are some units that are in terms of our business structure that are more advanced, and the training wasn't necessary for them. And in that case, we almost suggested to them that you really didn't need to attend. If you could answer and understand what all of the deliverables mean and what the processes are within the DMBOK, then don't worry about it. You don't need to attend the training. What I have found very beneficial when doing the training is that I could actually get a really high-level sense of where people felt that the training was. I hope I've answered you on that. Okay, so when do we do it? As an example, as a consequence, if a data strategy is refreshed, if we have a project feasibility, we could do it as well. I've seen that being very handy. We want to take on a new technology, and so we can do a quick assessment of where we are. Would you provide support in these maturity assessments, Shimi? Yes, certainly. For example, when we've just done with Modon, with AFNAM, we almost tend to have a specialist that does it in the beginning, and then we transition that maturity assessment to be done by the champions in subsequent years. So you want a specialist to do it initially and explain some of the issues and things that they don't always understand. So a good example of where things are not always understood, if we want to do an assessment for a specific deliverable, I've got all the deliverables from the DMBOK. Not all the deliverables are well explained. So I can't always say, go and read chapter 5, this verse, whatever it is, and you will understand what an operating model looks like. Sometimes we need to explain that, and we're certainly working on some level of training to enable that. There's something like 183 deliverables, and it would be helpful to have that all well defined. Okay, what are the components of a maturity assessment? I really like this diagram that Irina in Netherlands did, and she broke up this assessment and really put it in a pictorial form of the different dimensions and components of a maturity assessment. We understand data quality, where it fits in, but there were some nice areas in terms of related capabilities like measurement and analysis, risk assessment, configuration management, what are the different elements that we have. And then what I really liked what she did was she mapped the DMBOK, DCAM, CMMI, IBM, IGC, Stanford, and Gartner. So this was also helpful to have a pictorial view. Lots of people ask me the question, I want to go Gartner, what is the difference? And we'll say, look, here's a view. I know it's changed somewhat since that, but that is helpful. And then there's another resource that I can provide you where in Excel, I've almost done a mapping of the different frameworks and then how does it map to DCAM and CMMI. Again, this is about a year old, so if you'd like an update or a refresh, happy to provide that. These are the different domains that you've got. Okay, now I like John Ladley's view of maturity spectrums, and it's actually really helpful to understand these different levels, especially when you get hold of a framework to say, what spectrum is it using? The DMBOK uses this capability basis, tends to be on functions and deliverables. And so you have initial, repeatable, defined, managed, and optimized. And then on an organization basis, for example, digital transformation, they tend to use more of an organizational basis. So are we optimizing? Are we innovating? Are we consolidating? What is that organizational level? Then there's a usage basis and a content basis. I've certainly, most of the times I've seen these bottom two. I've built a maturity assessment for analysis or analyzing, being big data and BI, and that looks like this: analyzing, predictive, operation, closed loop, and foresight. So that looks like that one above. So, but I haven't had any experience on the top one being make it happen faster. What happened? Why did it happen? That almost looks like those 5 questions that you ask from a BI point of view. What happened? Why did it happen? What will happen? And elements like that. Okay. So those are the different areas that you should understand that what that framework is going to give you. Here is the Stanford one. And notice that there's a qualitative and a quantitative area. I really like this, and I certainly can advise you. Sometimes when you start, you may not want to go straight into a quantitative level, especially from people's understanding if it's low. Rather operate on a qualitative review, almost a survey. How do you feel we are with data governance? How do you feel we're governing our data? What do you feel our data quality is like? And you can get an assessment of a 0 to 5. It's a lot quicker, it's a lot simpler. But the challenge I found personally is the first time I did it, I went into a qualitative one. The next year I did it, I went into quantitative, and we actually went backwards. So what people feel and what's the actual truth, because you don't really have evidence, they can be two different things. And then when we tried to install all of these assessments, then we got into trouble. Well, we went backwards, and then the exec started saying, "Why are you going backwards? I thought you were supposed to improve." And so these are some of the questions. So Stanford's got some guiding questions. So if you'd like to understand how to put a survey together, not so much an assessment, these are the type of questions that you can go through. Here's a view of the different areas of the IBM model: quality, lifecycle management, security, architecture, classification and metadata, auditing, risk management. And again, these are different approaches and different groupings. And I'll show you some of those mappings. Now, the way I've handled all of these different areas is I like to do it at a DMBOK deliverable level and then find ways to aggregate either a vertical aggregation or a horizontal mapping to the other framework or the other maturity model, depending on which one you're working with. This is CMMI, 5 categories, 20 processes. So this is process driven. And what I like to do then is map the processes that create our DMBOK deliverables up into these processes and supporting processes. So that's what CMMI looks like. These are the different areas that they have. Notice that some of the areas were missing. Now, again, please, this is almost a year old. But for example, I missed data modeling in this area. So please, when you do these framework selections, make sure you've got your requirements defined so that you can clearly understand the mappings. Okay, this is the assessment methodology. I like this. Comment here: you are what you do. That's almost what we used in definition for terms is defining a term, defining meaning, describe it in what you do. Now, this model emphasizes behavior, and the activities result in work product. Okay. Now, this is the Gartner model. Again, it may have been updated. Sometimes I was a little bit confused. For example, in this one is we have someone asked me if I'm sharing the screen. I do believe I'm sharing the screen. Is anyone else not seeing my screen?
I can see it.
I can see it.
Okay. Okay, Paul, was that an answer, or do you have a question?
I will ask it just now. I don't know if it's going to interrupt you, but just back to the quantitative and qualitative.
Yes.
Just to double check with you, is that meaning, for instance, the question when dealing with data modeling, do you have a data model? Quantitative question, and how many? And qualitative, have you measured it against the scorecard?
So what I find is a qualitative question would be giving you almost like an answer in text, and you can't convert that to a number, Paul. Whereas a quantitative, you would map it to a number, a range between 0 and 5. So qualitative there's almost.
Okay, so it's to do with the measure, not the actual question. Okay.
Well, it's sometimes when you survey it, the question you ask, the possible answers are either how do you feel about it, how do you think we're doing, do we have any, what's the friction like, and things like that. Is there a thing to improve and stuff like that. So,
right.
Qualitative is it's hard to quantify. Therefore, you can't put it down to a number, and then it's hard to aggregate the numbers in terms of your summaries and things like that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So then we go into the Gartner level. These are the different Gartner areas that you come along. Notice that the levels are similar. Now, what I always found interesting was that they almost have a business case at a level 3. Now, a lot of the times when we from a DMBOK point of view, our level 3 is defined. That business case is almost gone. The business case was happening prior to that, and we're now in building principles, policies, and procedures. So I found this one a little bit strange to have that approval up there, and we then we start developing. Have we defined our processes? Have we got our deliverables? So there's a different area over here. This is Oracle's one. Also interesting in terms of the adoption level. They were looking at governance. This is more at assessing their governance side of it, an individual area. And then you've got the Open University, another one that's available. We've got the CDO playbook, and notice the range of type of questions. The way I like the CDO playbook, that it dealt with people. What are the skills, the behavior, the leadership? Paul, this is another one where sometimes it's not really, it's quite hard to be quantitative. I keep on remembering with Christine when we ask her, like, how do you assess your involvement of your leaders in the program? Is there a measure? And I find it hard to get a quantitative response. And then we've got all the different methods and the tools that we bring in. Now, this is John Ladley's basically approach in terms of how we do an assessment. These are the tasks. So I'm sure you've got John Ladley's book, and you'll certainly pick up some of the tasks. I hope that I'll share with you as well different ways of doing it. His approach to governance is scope the governance requirement, assess where you're at, build a vision, align it to the business and ensure business value, functional design it, create your governance framework, build a roadmap, and roll out and sustain. And there we go, constantly round and round. Okay, so how do we do an assessment? How do we actually perform the assessment? And this is the DMBOK context diagram. These are the actual steps that we take. I've used these steps, and you can certainly see the deliverables. These are the deliverables that I'm talking about. So you are going to get ratings. You're going to get a maturity baseline. You should be doing a readiness assessment at the end. So what I'd like to explain to people, the readiness, you could look at it, are we ready for an assessment? And you can also look at it, are we ready, are we capable of achieving our target level that we've set? And then staffing capability, are the people capable? And then what investment and recommendations? So those are some really good deliverables that you can ensure that you've done, and then some metrics that you can help to measure. Now, so this is the process that I've used. I first of all understand the scope. Then I look at the envisioning and sending out communication and making sure that we've got the awareness and design and desire, and with training as well, with the knowledge. Then we do the assessment. I review. After doing the review, we go through an action plan. Then we build a roadmap, and then we look at that sustainability. So that's basically the steps that I typically go through. Now, one of the challenges I found with the DMBOK levels, maturity levels, is that they were quite wordy, and the words themselves didn't really make much sense. So initial and ad hoc, and also repeatable, I found I always battled to really explain repeatable, and I suppose it's part of the CMMI understanding from my level, is that repeatable means that you can reproduce the process, and you can reproduce the outcome each time, where it's not really well defined. So this is what I refer to as a one line. So the one that is missing is this level 0 being absent. And there are several cases, for example, in the NDMO, one that we've just done with Afnan, there are things that just haven't been done. Like, for example, there may not, or the ministry involved may not have submitted any open data at that point. Okay, so it's absent. We're not doing it. Some cases, for example, big data, we're not doing it. If you are, fantastic, then you're on these levels. So we're saying that the capability doesn't exist and it's not happening. In the other areas, is the initial and ad hoc, we're saying success depends on the individual. So if you do have a strong individual, you can get the quality that you are expecting, and the process is defined. But it's, for example, it's a Paul Bolton or an Afnan that are doing good work, and Max and Mark, and they're able to do it, but the organization doesn't understand it. The organization doesn't really know what they're doing, and they can't mimic that at this point in time. Then level 2 is repeatable. There's a minimum process discipline in place. Level 3 is where we've got standards set, and that's sometimes what I refer to the P3T. But we've got the standards, and then the processes are quantified. Paul, notice here we've now moved into quantification. So I can give you a measurement on how long it takes to build a data quality expectation or to do a data quality profile. We've got them quantified and we controlled, and they know exactly how it's happening. We then go into process improvement and goals, and then we're getting better. So we optimize. Okay, those are the different levels. This is what I do from a scope point of view. We can choose which knowledge areas and the different projects that we're going to build, what deliverables are in and out of scope. And we then go into some level of assessment. And the first level of assessment, and it depends on, are we at a departmental area, and then we come down into a knowledge area. From a knowledge area, we go to almost a phase, for example, planning. We then get into activity, for example, develop a data strategy or a data governance strategy, and then what is the deliverable? So there's ratings at all these different levels, and then the maturity level of that deliverable. I also introduce risk into this. That's not something that's published in the DMBOK, but I do have a risk rating and a risk level and impact. So what I'm trying to say here is the fact that we're not doing this process and we don't have it controlled, what risk does that reflect or represent to the organization? So if a regulator's asking you to perform quality profiles and you're not doing it, what is the risk of that? And that's where you pick up these issues of, oh, we're not doing what we're doing, and what's the risk of it? And then, of course, the rate of change. So in our trends, how we're progressing. Okay. And then if I just show you in terms of the DMBOK, when I assess data governance, I'm also looking at handling ethics, roles and expectations, change management, and DMA. So all of these areas should come into your assessment. It's not just those 11 knowledge areas. For example, you won't see big data in a knowledge area, but we associate it with data warehousing and BI. So that's why we refer to it as how to analyze. Okay, so just be careful that you should be looking at your ethics. You should be looking at how well your organization's been defined, your change management, and your maturity. Okay, so here's a simple example of what I've got in Excel spreadsheets. I always recommend that before you get into a tool or things like that, can you do it? Do you understand the process, and can you do it in Excel? I know it's painful in some cases, but it's helpful for you to have a great understanding of what you're doing. Okay, then the last one in terms of who is involved, I've just built a persona diagram in terms of when we talk about collaboration and getting consensus, we're talking about a broad range of stakeholders. We're then looking at a business department when we're going lower down. Within that, we ask for a data steward to provide us with evidence. So if they say that at level 3 on data quality, okay, show me the evidence. Show me your quality profiles, your different dimensions. And then we've got a stakeholder. The report goes to all of the stakeholders. And then we have an executive presentation. Okay, so we're talking then to departmental managers and coordinating data stewards. So those are the sort of range of people that you need to include in this maturity. And then, of course, I also like to understand the organization location. So lots of times the organization is broken up into all sorts of different areas. This is a sample from a university, but then we've also got IT, supporting areas, procurement, finance, HR. So are we going to assess them, or are we just going to assess operations? For example, the different faculties or academic or the registrar. So what is the level of assessment that you need to define? Okay, so those are the essential concepts of doing a maturity assessment. Are there any questions? I don't see any, so I will continue if no one puts their hand up. Okay, so now we get to how does the manager take care of this? So you've seen what the assessment looks like, but now we're talking about management. Okay, management plays a vital role in this, setting the tone, making sure we get the outcomes of it. So yes, the professional is going to guide and make sure that everyone understands, but the manager needs to take care of the challenges. And before they take care of the challenges and that, I like these pillars of maturity. One being strategy, then we look at the culture, we look at our organization, and then we look at capability. So when we talk about strategy and we want to build a DMMA strategy, so we want to understand our vision. So why do we need to keep on assessing our maturity? And what I've seen most of the times when we talk about it and justify it, it's about that continuous improvement. Can we measure that we're getting better, that we have better data, better people, better processes, and better technology? So we have to look at this improvement. It's critical to data governance. How are we improving? And then our roadmap, this is also important. Compliance is certainly important. I like to differentiate between what is a driver and what's an outcome. Compliance certainly drives us, but we're looking for effective data management and business value as the outcome. So here I tend to explain to people that regulations are drivers to get the job done. And then we must look to what is the outcome is getting the job being more efficient and being more effective, that we're delivering more value. And what we're trying to achieve, the final achievement, is this knowledge-driven organization and business strategy alignment and enablement. So those are some of the outcomes that I use to prepare the the use case. This is sort of what our maturity, sort of what we represent as an outcome. Notice this is different to levels 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the state of the organization is that we've achieved the outcome of being data-driven or knowledge-driven, or in some cases we data-disabled. These are the sort of the journey that we have in terms of the transformation of the business. Okay, so different to maturity assessment, they're not really there, but they're also on that level of continuum. When I talk about culture, the two areas that I like to assess, and this is sort of the aspect that I've introduced with that helped me introduce risk, was this risk appetite. So what's our appetite for risk? Are we willing to take risks? Do we have the capacity to take risks? And then what's our tolerance in terms of that? And this is a cultural thing in terms of we have a culture within the organization that we're not risk takers, or we're highly innovative and we're happy to take risks. So we also need to understand what our risk appetite is. And then, of course, it's this decision-making appetite. So do we have the appetite to get to a scenario where we're data-driven or knowledge-driven? And a lot of the time, I believe it depends on the levels of trust and the levels of agreement. So if we have bad levels of trust, then we are inattentive, and I'll show you some examples of those continuums. So this is my risk impact that I produce as a result of my maturity assessment. Can you see the risk impact here? And these are the questions that I ask. For example, if we're really battling in some areas, I would ask the people, the fact that we're really low on our score, what is the probability of us having a challenge here? And what is the impact of that challenge? So you see the black line coming along here. This is the risk appetite. The red lines show the risk tolerance. Now, if the executives don't have a tolerance for critical risks, which makes sense, a lot of people do not want to be in that area, then you need the tolerance to define the boundary. And when things go over or approaching the boundary, you've got to do something about it. So we have risk appetite, risk tolerance, and then we have our risk capacity. So what level of risk are our people capable of doing? And of course, the more capacity you have, the more innovative you can be. And then this is just my thing on those continuums on trust. When we build the trust, if we're really below these levels, then we're getting worse and worse and worse. And then trying to improve data management is a bit of a meaningless task, because they just don't even believe that data has some value to it. And then we go into the other level where there's people making decisions very quickly. Okay, so from an organizational point of view, that's a summary. We're talking about continuous improvement. Can we benchmark ourselves to other areas? And then we want to benchmark also the people that we have and our capabilities. We're also bringing about collaboration. So once you do these assessments, it's also helpful to have a level of collaboration. So can people comment on that we're doing practices very well, or we're doing practices badly, or we can improve, or we can innovate? So can we disrupt our current level of practice? Or do we have the best practice? And there's always contention around what is the definition of best. I like to keep it simple to say we understand the cause and effect, and it's well defined. And then, of course, the trust level that we're getting at is can we delegate data decision making, and at what speed are we making our decisions? Okay. When I look at the capability of our organizations, what is the capability of our expertise? This will come into your readiness assessment. Do we have the people, the professionals at each level? Do we have people or thought leaders to bring about innovation? And then do we also have generalists? So what I like sometimes is, yes, there's specialization, but then there's also generalization across all knowledge areas. So do we have someone that can generalize data management and not just quality on their own? Okay, so we look at our skills, the processes, and technology. Okay, I'm going to go. So this is what the manager needs to pay attention to. It's those softer areas. Now, I like this diagram that Christine gave me, and she calls it understanding change management and change, and she uses these 3 areas of can you see it, do you own it, and can you do it? Vision, buy-in, and execution. And she basically says that if there's a case for change, if there's a good case for data management and continuous improvement, and we have committed leaders with a clear what is in it for me, with a concrete plan, with all our policies, procedures, practices, and technology in place, with the reinforcement, that's when you get an outcome of it's working. Okay. If you don't have a business case, okay, then the outcome that people typically see is, well, it's not urgent. We don't have a case to change. We don't have a driver that's moving us forward. So we don't get that level of urgency. If we don't have leadership, if we don't have committed leadership stakeholders that's saying this is important, then the impact of people is saying, well, it's not real. They can't see it and they don't understand why they should be doing it. That's also the what's in it for me, where it's not worth it. I can't see the value to the business, therefore I'm not doing it. If there's no planning, typically we get a situation where our management or our data management is not going anywhere. And so all the uplift, we're not seeing anything, and we don't get the answers that we need. And then we're not ready. So it's not possible. One of the things we like to explain to people, especially when we're doing these assessments and the target, do you have a plan to get there? And are we capable of getting there? If it's not possible, people are not going to go on the journey with you. So you have to pay attention to that. And if you don't have assurance, then you may get a good assessment this year, but it's not going to continue next year and the year after. So helpful to have that as your change, helpful to assess where you are, and then just bringing checkpoints. I see someone's got a hand up.
Me.
Yes.
I see that you have a 3PT. I'm sorry if I'm jumping, but I saw on a previous slide there was a, what is it? It was
PT, yeah.
3T.
Yeah. So it stands for that what we need to have in place for all of the things we do in data management are what are our principles, what are our policies, and what are our procedures, and then technology can either be existing technology or a reference architecture. So if we haven't got these defined in terms of do we have our processes defined, do we have our standards defined, then we can't keep the pace and we can't keep getting better. Does that answer it, Deb?
Yes. So when it's the P3T.
And the 3PT, sorry.
So the first one is the principle, the 3 Ps, and then 1 technology. And then when it's the other way around?
It's the same. I wasn't consistent. My apologies.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Sorry. Well spotted, Deb.
Okay.
I'll upgrade my slide. Okay, so when I've done, so that's almost our change management, and you'll have lots of failures if you don't pay attention to some of those areas. The other areas that I've when working with people, lots of people ask you, how do you justify the value of a data management maturity assessment? Because in quite a few cases, I've actually heard people say to me that, a maturity assessment is for consultants and they create rainmaking opportunities, meaning that they tell you that you're really bad and you really need them to fix it. And so you must pay them a whole lot of money to get better. Okay. I've heard those comments quite a few times, and in some cases, I went into one organization and they weren't interested in doing a maturity assessment because that's been their experience. And we had to spend quite a bit of time overcoming this comment of, you're just scoring us badly because you want more money, basically. That was the comment. And then what does the assessment say about the business? Is it cost? Is it creating any challenges? And then the other one that I pick up a lot is, please explain the difference between alignment, maturity assessment, and an audit. Are we doing a measuring of our alignment with business? Are we measuring the maturity of our data management, or are we being audited? And I promise you that the people respond very differently. I'm sure you've seen it. If you have someone coming along and they say they're going to audit your work, it's quite different to that of doing an assessment. That the lines can get grayed, and if you don't take time to explain to people that this is not an audit that you're performing, and there are going to be ramifications of doing badly, they will change their scores. The scores will be different, and the claims will be, of course, you go to evidence and you try to justify it, but you spend a lot of time trying to get that sorted out. Then the next question that I have a lot is getting the right framework. Do we reuse existing stuff? Do we buy a framework that's there, or do we build? Which one is it? I'm not sure how many of you people have an existing maturity assessment product in place. Most of the times I see that people don't have. They want to go to something, or for example, they did it 3 years ago using DCAM, and they like the output, but they haven't kept up their product payments or their license agreements, so they'd like to still have the DCAM-like type of framework. And then if you want to go to build, if none of these reuse and buy are available, how would you build it? How would you create your own framework? Those are the questions that you need to ask. And then the one that keeps me awake at night is the so what. I do all the work, I do all these assessments, you spend 3 months, you present the results, and the executive says, so what? So what does this mean? And if you don't pay attention to the message that and how people are going to respond to the assessment, I think you can run into lots of challenges, and you can lose the impetus of a maturity assessment. I find it sometimes falls flat. Okay, you've done all this fantastic work, that's our level, okay, fine, let's move on. And the commitment to building the roadmap and fixing is just not there. Okay, so here's just some examples of how to go through it. I am running a bit late, apologies for that. So building a business case, this is what I like to have as part of my business case. What is the risk? What is the risk of not doing it, and what is the risk of doing it? So it's nice when you have a compliance issue, then you basically say, oh, you've been marked as non-compliance, and there we've got a legal/reputational risk. That is helpful. And if you don't have a regulator that's asking for it, typically you'll focus on a reputational risk. If you're at a low maturity, what is the risk of being low maturity, and can you see it? Are you missing service level agreements? Are you missing operation level agreements? Do you not have any assurance that this data management program is going to survive and is going to deliver value? You don't have any knowledge management, there's no practice definitions, we're all just dependent on the superheroes getting the job done. So we have to find ways of overcoming that business risk. If someone leaves, then what happens when that person leaves? We can't keep it up. What is our cost? And this is where I want to bring what I call right size maturity. So we have to be careful of trying to push too far all the way up to level 5, because more and more when we get to managed and automated and optimized, we're bringing in a lot more technology. Okay, so is the value of that technology going to benefit us? You have to ask that question. A lot of times I find people stopping at a level 3 and a level 4. I haven't seen many people, when I've done the reviews, of demanding to go to a level 5. Okay, so these are the different cost areas of your business case, and these are the benefits. And I always like to break it up into strategic, tactical, and operational. So you should be able to show the people that, if we are able to perform these processes and the processes are being effective, or efficient, sorry, and then being effective, we should be able to achieve business agility, the sustainability, and the transformation. If one looks at digital transformation, that's what it's all about. Then we go into tactical and operational, okay, where we can discover. So let's take some examples. I like this diagram of moving from business efficiency to business effectiveness and business transformation. But notice also the change of information requirements as we go up, where we're going from operational information to business management information. That's where we have our business management frameworks. And then we're looking at competing information about what's going on in the market. Okay, so these are the things that you drive your value. This is an interesting one. I always refer to this as, how do you find the perfect storm to justify governance, data management? The example that I can use is the NDMO within Saudi Arabia. They've come along and said everyone will be at a certain level. Now that is one of the perfect storms. That is, no one argues about, do we need to be compliant? Everybody knows that we need to be compliant, and it's now how are we going to get there? So I like that perfect storm. And what I have done with Afnan's help is we looked at being compliant. So what we basically set is from a level 0 to a level 2, we're non-compliant. Notice that compliant is a binary switch. So you're either non-compliant or compliant. And so when we get to a level 3 on all of the areas, that's when we are compliant. And then we use these lower levels as a progress indicator. So a level 0, we haven't started. A level 1 is we're 33%. A level 2 is 66%. And a level 3 is we've achieved compliance. So maturity can also be a compliance rating. And then, of course, we go to how are we achieving that being managed and optimized. So this is the way we've done it with Afnan and within a regulator that demands data management. So I'd love to hear your questions or challenges or what you think of marrying the two, compliance and maturity, at the same time. I found that beneficial, but I did find I had to take some time in terms of what you'll find is when you do the assessment, you then re-expressing it in terms of compliance, not in terms of data management activities. And we can show some examples. Okay. Alignment, maturity, or audit, which one are we doing? Okay. Now, business alignment, and I like to make this differentiation, is does the structure, the use of resources and culture support the business strategy? Okay. And in that, you would use something called the Amsterdam Information Model. I don't know if anyone has seen that. That's an alignment model. Okay. That's how they look at the alignment between IT, data, and business. It's not the same as a maturity model. Of course, you can get what is the level, the maturity of our alignment, but it's not the same as what we refer to as a maturity assessment. Our maturity assessment is looking at the processes and creating the appropriate deliverables and the level of quality of our deliverables according to our standards, our procedures, guidelines. So now to do this, we need to look at the expertise that we have, the processes, and the technology. Now, an audit is also slightly different, where we're talking about our 3 lines of defense. Have you done this task? What was the outcome? And that's almost done during your SDLC. There's the first level of operational assurance, all the processes being defined. And then we have governance assurance, that we check that operations are doing it. We have internal audit that's reviewing that we are doing our governance. And then you can have an external audit, which is the 4th line of defense, to ensure that the internal audit's doing it. Now, that, for example, may be a regulator. In accounting, this is, for example, an accounting firm like KPMG that would come and audit finance or internal audit that things are happening in the right level. Okay. Just a quick thing in terms of the strategy alignment. I just wanted to show you what a strategy alignment looks like. These are the details. Can you see that our information strategy should be dependent on our business strategy? Technology should be dependent on information. And these are all the mappings. And then we look at what our outcomes are, information and process. Okay. And this is the way that alignment looks at it. Okay, so what is the business scope? And then we would compare these different areas. And this is a alignment maturity. I'm just showing it. This was something that I was unaware of. I always saw those diagrams in the DMBOK, and I never realized the level of detail that one should go to measure your alignment. Anybody else spend time in this alignment model? I found it very interesting and revealing that I've never really gone to detail of my alignment. And certainly when we get into digital transformation, this is important in terms of that alignment. Because when we just the words digital transformation, yes, data is one of it, but the transformation of the business is talking about the alignment level that we have. Okay. All right, so then we talk about choosing the right framework. So if we're looking at reuse, for example, can we reuse some of our survey management systems or our learning management systems, looking at outcomes or knowledge management systems? So could I make use of these to build a maturity assessment? Okay, and I believe you can. You just need to understand what your requirements are. Excuse me, and can we match them properly? Can we match these products to achieve those requirements? And in some cases, when you talk to John Ledley, he has lots of surveys that he creates that they constantly send out. And in some cases, your initial data management maturity assessment can just be a survey and a qualitative assessment. So in some cases, you can use it, but not always. Then when you buy, these are the things to check. Can you achieve the business value, and can it support the operating model? One of the areas now that I found with looking at compliance, a lot of the times we did the assessment according to the Saudi Arabia's NDMO definitions. And so you had to ask questions in that form, and you had to produce evidence in that form to submit to the regulator. So having a general data quality doesn't actually help you. It needs to be the domains that the regulator has defined. And sometimes these products can't configure those domains to present a different view. Okay. And then the next one is can you reverse engineer the data model of the data that you're collecting to have a mapping to what you want to build? Okay. And then if you were to build it, okay, if you wanted to build a data management maturity assessment framework, what would you define as your minimal viable product? What's the very first set of things that I need out? Now, to do that, you need your product features. You need to understand the features, and then building a data asset to support all of this. So what is the data that you're collecting? That is a data asset. And where do I start? Do I do a simple survey? And then what does the target look like? What does the feature list look like in that scenario? Also, just in terms of helping you guys out here, in terms of a maturity matrix definition, what is a maturity assessment? What does the matrix look like? It should be able to be performed by anybody. It gives you the insights on where you can achieve improvement. It looks at applicable across evolving products. Are we getting better? Integrates into community resources for collaboration. We should be using it as a reference tool. It should be digital. If you can get there first, that's the appropriate one. And then we have collaboration, engagement, and assessment. Now, sorry, I just went too quickly there. What is it not? It's not an audit. It can not only be performed by specialists. Retro assessment of what happened. It mustn't focus on that. It must be focusing on the target and going further. Bespoke to predetermined issues, tailored to institutional processes. A lot of the times you're defining a benchmark and you're able to compare it, for example, to the DMBOK. And it's not only to the processes within your institution. It's not just a summative assessment of accountability, only used for key decision points and paper-based. So what I have found in this was an interesting article that in some cases I could make it specific to this institutional process. So you can do it initially, but you want to then graduate to being more generic and more industry-based. Okay. So here's the feature list that I've put together. What's an absolute minimum if you were to build it? Your ability to scope the definition and to filter out certain areas. So for example, we don't want to ask questions about open data because we know we're not doing any open data or we're not doing any big data. We also know in some cases that we don't have any strategy defined. So let's not worry about the strategic phases, or always coming down to deliverables. We can actually filter out the actual deliverables and you can make them out of scope. Now, please note that your out of scope could change by department. So, for example, if you're assessing a business department and you're asking for a governance operating model, that aspect is probably not appropriate to that business unit. So you can filter out there as well. So you've got quite a lot of scoping and configuration that you need to do before you do the assessment. What you really worried about is, for example, if I say 0, that means I'm going to reduce my levels completely. Not completely. I'm going to reduce them dramatically. So I've got to be careful of marking things as a 0 when it's not applicable. And then how do you present it? You can either present it in a radar or a bar chart. How do you get the assessment results out? And then how would you map it to a regulator? If you had a regulator, how would you map this assessment? Because they're asking you for that. All right, and then these are just standard other areas. Can you map it to alternative frameworks? Can you do a risk review? Can you collect the evidence? So can you show the data models? Can you show a data quality profile that justifies you that you have a data catalog or you have whatever you need? Can you operate across multiple organizational units and roll them up? So can I do organizational aggregation? So can I look at a maturity at an organization level? Or is it just at a unit level? Can I do independent unit assessments by each data steward? Can they do their own assessment? And can this process still run? Now that's going to that next level. And then premium is where you start introducing the stakeholder management and mapping. You look at assessment training. We look at collaboration around the DMMA, the evidence scorecard, sector benchmarking, executive reporting, and then so what to manage the downstream. If you think of an action plan tells you how are you going to remediate the problems that we found. How do we do that? So we've now got to say we've got to institute this process, this deliverable to fix that problem. How are we going to fix our people? How are we going to train them? How are we going to educate them? What we do the roadmap, and for example, how can we feed this into the data strategy? Okay, simple examples of a horizontal mapping where you can take the DMBOK and you map all levels to the regulator, map to their domains, their controls. That's what I refer to as a horizontal mapping. That's quite a tricky one. This one is a lot easier where I can just aggregate activities into a framework so I can work at a lower level. And when I report, I can report either for CMMI or for DCAM or whichever level I need to report it. I've done both of these areas. They take a different approach. I'm wondering if Paul Krobel is on the call. He did mention that he was going to talk. He's not. Okay. He's done some work on these mappings and he can talk to us about it. Okay. Then how do we answer the so what? Okay. We have to build an action plan. We have to recognize our problems. We understand what the impact is on the business. We have to describe how do we going to fix the problems. This is what an action plan is. How do we remediate the problems? And then our priorities. Okay, How do we deal with do we have non-compliance as our biggest priority? Do we have business benefits as our biggest priority? Or do we have low-hanging fruit as our biggest priority? We need to have that way of, we've got lots of challenges, we've got lots of things to do. How do we describe how we're going to tackle it? Then our readiness is about saying, is it possible? Do we have the right people to fix the problem? And do we have the right culture? Those two things. People and culture, and then I'm sure I missed out, this one is technology. Do we require technology to deal with some of the issues? And then the roadmap is to say, will it last? So build in your milestones, your compliance milestones, build in your program definition, and then the roadmap milestones. Cost benefit analysis, what return on investment am I going to get to being a level 3? What return on investment I'm going to be at a level 4 and a level 5? That's when you want to introduce a cost benefit analysis. And then the final step, just in terms of a summary of all of the things I've spoken about, and a call to action for our managers is to say, can you ensure that you're providing business value? Okay, remember, those are the failures. We're going to have failures. Now you need to ensure that you can provide business value, and we use the business case for that. Okay, do we have the right leadership and stakeholders? So what's in it for me? That leadership commitment and the leadership and the commitment. Now we'll use our stakeholder maps, we'll use our communication, and we'll use the action plan when we focus on our problem priority on the business benefits. That's how we get the leadership and the commitment. That's how people start seeing, I've got something to benefit out of this thing. When our readiness assessment will deal with that issue of not being ready, do you have the capability to reach the target state? Assess it. Please don't ignore this thing of just saying, we've got a level 3 now and we want to get to level 5. Let's get going. And then you discover that there's so many roadblocks in the way. Make sure that your executives are aware of the challenges you're going to face before you start going down the route. Then the next one, the action plan and the roadmap. Is it pragmatic? People are going to ask the question, this is fancy. You can do all this stuff, but I don't have the time. We're not going to be able to achieve it. So it's a waste of time. The plan is not pragmatic. And of course, the last one is, do we have assurance? Do we have things in place? Do we have our 3PT or P3T? Do we have a cost benefit analysis? And do we have the lines of defense? So can you assure me that we will deliver business value? Sorry about going too long on that. I took a bit long to get through all those things. Any questions? I notice there aren't any questions. Any comments? Anything you'd like to review?
Good stuff, Howard. Thank you.
Mark, have your experiences on doing maturity assessments?
I've never gotten to run one. I was part of one at a big oil company. So I was part of the team doing the assessment. That was a few years ago. So a lot of what you've presented here makes sense. I love the comparison to the different methodologies, because that's sometimes the position I'm in as well. You know, I'm known as a DAMA guy, so why not DCAM? Why not CMMI?
Right. Yeah, I think one of the biggest criticisms that I've experienced, and it's not really a criticism as much as it is a situation of a DMMA or the DMBOK does not give credibility to the organization. Where DCAM and that the organization can say, I'm a level 3 and I've been vetted by this, and they have a lot more control, and people have that sense of comfort when they can see that you've got that level. Right. Of course the DMBOK doesn't get there, but that's part of why am I choosing this framework? I need to choose it so I can justify to people that I'm at that level.
Right on.
Max, anything from your side? Have you done it?
No, I wasn't. We have done a part of this, but we use DCAM, but I was not part of that assessment myself, so an experience.
Okay. And then just a question from Afnan. I know that you've just about finished it. Afnan, is there any comments from your side? You've been through the process.
No, actually, I did the DMMA. I'm about to present the result for the executive, the top management. Maybe the thing is that I'm not sure about is it that much necessarily to do the readiness assessment, and what are the steps to make it higher result?
Oh, okay. So, and I think what your action plan in terms of how you're going to fix the problems, that tends to be your steps. So, for example, if you're really low on a compliance, a specification in the NDMO level, and the specification may be a training plan. Well, you're going to build the activity of preparing training for metadata, sharing agreements, all those things. That becomes your remediation plan or your action plan. And those become your steps in terms of your roadmaps, that high level thing, but your action plan are the steps that you're going to do to implement and get that achievement.
Yeah, I see.
Okay. So I think I like actually doing the action plan before I sit with the program office to say, how are we going to roll this out? What business projects can we make use of? How do we integrate it into your program portfolio to actually get it working and get these things done? Because it affects all of the business areas. So it's really hard to build a roadmap without the involvement of other parties, where the action plan is, a lot of the times you can define what the action plan is. I think I had a question from Ahmad.
Yeah, hi, Howard. Thanks a lot for the great explanation. Just I have one point I am facing during my, once we execute some maturity exercise, how we can convince our executive about the business value. As you aware, most of the projects we are enforced by complaint for the regularity. From us, we try to convince them. Even we did successfully, like once we implement such kind of enhancement in the project management, the impact analysis time will be reduced, the time to market will be reduced. But yes, it's related to the kind of operational work. But we fail to project some tangible, like the analytics project. For the analytics project, it's easy to convince the management this is the value, or this is the business value.
Yes.
From our side, this is only the main concern we are facing to convince our executive. We prove, yes, we enhance our time to market delivery, we enhance the time for the impact analysis, but still they are not feeling it's not tangible value from business perspective. So if we can have more highlights, especially how we can convince them, it's not only for the compliance, for the regulation. There is a real business value from this data management program.
I like what you're saying, Ahmad, and I know we spent quite a bit of time with Afnan saying the problem with compliance is that I like to say it's a driver, it's not an outcome. So your driver is compliance and your outcome is business value. And if you focus all on your driver, then no one really understands what we're trying to achieve. And we've got to get that right. And we've got to be able to explain to the business what is the benefit. Remember, I'm trying to get there. It's that risk. Let me just check my slide deck. You remember I said the business risk, the business cost, and the business benefit. So I'm just going to that now. That's going to be the components of your business case. Okay, so it's slide 56. Okay, so this is how, these are the elements that I use to build a business case. And one of the reasons for me introducing risk to a maturity assessment is that it's extremely helpful to get my business case and my business value going when I can demonstrate the risk that the business is facing by either being non-compliant or having a low level of maturity. And having a low level of maturity, in a way, will create more risk for your analytics because you can't produce good quality data, right? You can't ensure the quality, you can't ensure that your understanding your metadata or the context is right. So if you're trying to put on a fancy analytics program and you can't get your quality right or your metadata right, or your cataloging right, then you're going to suffer with your analytics. So you need to draw all of these issues together by looking at where you have low maturity and saying that low maturity will impact these projects and the success of these projects. So that's a risk discussion. And I really like using the data of a maturity assessment. If you have proper data and you, for example, you're dependent on individuals, you're now saying, well, you know, you want it to be at an organizational level, we achieve organizational agility, but we're still operating at an individual level. So we have risks at our expertise level, or we have risks at technology, that we're not going to have the right technology to get to the level that you need. So if you're demanding to have be really proactive in your data management and you have no tooling, you're going to suffer. You're going to be building your catalog manually. You're going to be classifying your data manually. You're going to spend 6 months building a data classification, and when you build it, it's changed. These are some of the risks that you need to do. You then also need to look at the cost benefit analysis, and then you need to talk about the business benefit. So when we go along this level of being able to satisfy business needs and to produce management information, this is the value that we keep bringing back to our business. So you'll find that these areas over here, the low maturity and the risk, is where you have pain. You have pain in the business. Your business is slow, it's ineffective, it's lack of agreement, it's not getting to agreement properly. Now you'll use these things to say, if we increase the maturity, you don't need to be at a level 5. You just need to get over some of these issues. We believe we will tackle these areas. Now, where you have to be clear on it is when you start moving on your maturity level, as part of your action plan, these things should be addressed and focused. Ahmed, does that answer your question?
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks a lot. Maybe this is sorry to take more time, but maybe this is return back to the same point. If we are having the data culture in our organization, even with the business user, will not face this much issues to convince or to explain the value or the outcome from the data management program.
Yeah. You want to, and that's always why I like to bring it to an organizational unit. Remember, I had that thing of different faculties within the universities. For example, in Modon, it may be the different departments, and then it also be the departments that they are managing. So I also mentioned their reporting entity. So if they are an umbrella ministry and they need to look at the maturity of all their reporting people that report to them, they need to look at that level of assessment there as well. With that information of their maturity, they can start understanding the risk. What is it then going to cost to fix? And then what's your business benefit?
See you next time, Howard.
Thank you very much.
Again.
Thank you, sir.
Howard, I don't know if you saw, it was Shimi's question right in the beginning.
Yeah.
About if you would be sorry, I think it was like mentoring. Would you provide support in these maturity assessments?
Oh, Debs, I tried to answer it and I maybe I answered it incorrectly. My apologies. I thought he was asking that when these assessments are done, is there a data management professional that supports the assessment? And I think I said, so for example, Afnan did a great job of taking her organization through it and explaining it. I know Paul's done it with Hollard. I do it a lot initially. I try to do it. I'll do it the first time. Then you sitting there. Then I'll monitor you the next time, and then you do it the third time. So that was, I thought, was his question. But if the question was, do I support people? I would be happy to help support people. I know Paul. We did it with Hollard, where Paul supported the person, get them up and running, prepare the thing, and then let them go. I've also helped Afnan in Modon doing it as well, to get her going and to get the steps coming along.
Amazing. Yeah, I think Shami has left.
Okay.
But we'll make sure that we can answer that question.
Excellent. Paul, what is your feeling? I know you guys are doing the data governance. This is certainly an area in the CDMP that does pick up quite a bit of questions. And a lot of the times it's business value and things like that as well.
Yeah. So actually just brought up the slide in last week's study group where we talked through the business drivers, the data governance slides from the how-to course on data maturity assessment. And these business drivers, I kind of flipped it slightly by saying, these are your triggers. When do you do this? When is the right time to do this? And I also saw those business drivers as an opportunity to kick off a maturity assessment, like you've mentioned here, regulation, obviously initiating a data governance program, organizational readiness for process improvement, your organizational change, new technology, maybe an obvious one, and data management issues, also an obvious one. But I like we spend a lot of time talking about readiness for process improvement and organizational change, hence the question last week to you about a governance operating model versus data management operating model. Is it the same thing or two different? But yeah, it sparked off a great conversation. But business drivers are great to as a discussion point.
Yeah.
And again, maybe to the question just now, again, building an understanding of for business case reasons, like when you're talking organizational readiness for process improvement, what if you don't do a maturity assessment? What's the danger? What's the risk?
Yeah, so that was a great thing, and we chatted with Afnan a lot. One of the things of not doing the assessment is you have qualitative feelings about the problems and the challenges that you face, and you have very little quantitative measures. So you can't stand on a good ground to say, guys, this is the size of my problem and the size of my risk. You're all saying this is what I think the problem is, and I promise you, we did something called the business benefits realization thing, BRM once, and everyone said quality, quality, quality. Everyone said it. I promise you, everyone said it, and we had everybody shouting about it. And we instituted our governance program on this quality issue. Then we had a new COO, and he said, "Oh, you got quality problems. Show me."
Sure. Yeah.
And I promise you, everyone just sat back there and said, "Well, I can't quantify it. I can't give him the areas that justify this use case or the business case." So the business case was based on feelings, and it wasn't based on data. Now, with the maturity assessment, you get a lot of that coming out, especially if you ask for evidence.
Yes.
Show me the evidence. And if you can't show me the evidence of that you at a level 3 on your processes, well, I'm sorry for you.
Yeah.
You're not there. So I've got no knowledge management. I've got no definition here. So what is it that we're talking about?
100%. A good example, again, not going to mention the person or the business, but we were talking on metadata management, in in your foundational data management slides for governance. And the question was, okay, so how do I know, or how do I start the game of metadata management? And so we just went back to the context diagram, looked at, because my immediate answer was, well, let's look at the architecture, and the data architecture is actually an input into the activities for metadata management. And the answer back was almost like a maturity question, saying, well, where's your architecture? And the answer was, there is none.
Yeah.
Okay, who's the architect? No, there isn't one. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So that's actually a practical, that's what the DMMA is doing.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the data architects are evaluated by almost the metadata that they produce in terms of data models, data flows, data lineage, data value chains. Those things guide, and they are metadata. I think data architecture produces metadata. And to an extent, it must be looking after the unified metadata where all of these things come along, so that they can do impact analysis, vertical impact analysis, which means subject area, conceptual, logical, physical, model to implementation, and then horizontal would be across your different subject areas or your different systems or your processes. All of those things stem from that good metadata maturity.
Yeah. So it was a cool exercise, just talking through it, and it came alive there. The benefits of the DMMA, identifying a problem that you have in the way of achieving your practices of metadata, and it starts to drill back, almost like root cause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we always talk to the business about making decisions on data, but we don't get the right data for our data governance and our data management practices. We don't get the right data. See another hands up.
Hi, Hara.
Yes,
I'm Masood. Hi, long time ago we have seen us. Hi. I have a question about the different units and process. Are there any? I have not seen the focus on the customer side, on the interest of the customer or the need. Are there in which kind of way are the focus also put on the customer side, what he really wants?
Masood, and when you use the word customer, are you referring to internal within the business or external customers?
External customers.
Okay, so I believe that should be brought in with respect to business value, right? So the business value, for example, if the business is based on a customer intimacy model, then when your value proposition as a business to the customer is data management improving the business value or the value to the customer. So if I can say that I'm aligned to my business and producing value for my business, that would talk to the value for the customer. Or you don't see it that way?
Okay.
So
thank you.
It's a good question, and there could be things. For example, data privacy springs to mind. GDPR, where I talk about my data subjects, and I would have an assessment on the maturity of my data privacy or my data security, data protection. That would go to compliance issues, non-compliance.
Okay, thanks.
Good question. So I think the other thing that I keep on saying is, if governance needs to be aware on how data management produces value to the business, and we as when we do a DMMA is to say, well, what is the maturity? What is the value of me doing a maturity assessment, spending 3 months on a maturity assessment to give the business value that will hopefully provide the customer value. Max, I see your hands up.
Yes, I've been thinking here for a little while. An organization is usually quite silo-based. So you was mentioned the different subject matter areas, for example. But then there is this when you in the data is needed cross subject matter areas, like you need to build up on BI platform, for example, to do analytics. And my question is a bit practical based on this. So if we are maturing now, I mean that means that we could either mature on silo basis, or we are maturing cross silos. For example, if we have a data warehouse and we have one subject matter area like savings, or should they also take in data governance responsibility for where the data is used? So savings area, for example, should they also take data governance over the data in the centralized storage, like the data warehouse?
Yeah, that's a good question, Max, and I found that it's very dependent. Again, I come back to the operating model. I have found that largely federated operating models, one could consider that each individual business unit to be a silo, as to your point. Now, one should pay attention to the way in which the business operates and their data usage before one makes that decision of being federated, being a hybrid model, or being consolidated or centralized. And that the challenge that you have when you federate is you create natural silos. And your maturity then is assessed almost at those areas of federation rather than, and you can certainly roll the number up across those units to the top. And that's almost part of the challenge that you face with aggregation. So let's say I've got 5 business units. Business unit 1 on average has a level 3, business unit 2 has a level 1, business unit 4 has a level 5, and if I average them, I'm saying I'm at a level 2.5, whatever that may be. But are we actually sharing data? Do we have an enterprise data model, and data flow and data usage across the different areas? Then it distorts that picture. It's a little bit like when you do data quality assessments and you evaluate data at a column level and a row level and a data set level. Does it roll up to a higher level? The answer is not always. Those measures are sometimes semi-additive, or they can't always be aggregated and said, we have an overall score. So if you were to do an organizational assessment, then you would be focusing from an enterprise data point of view at the sharing or the master data across those different areas, and not so much individual unit level. So there comes lots of discussions as to when I'm operating at a global level, how is that assessment? Is it an aggregation of the children, or does it need to be reworked at an organizational level? For example, if I'm a consolidated model and I look at data architecture and reference and master data, I would certainly be marking them down really immature if everything's siloed and there is no cross-department master data or system of records that's consistent for all the units. Your maturity is going to be really low. And so you tend to answer and mark them differently depending on the type of operating model that you're sitting with. I'll give you a good example at at one of the central banks that I worked with, initially for quite some time, they were adamant that it had to be siloed until they found a business case to unify it and go global. And so we were very careful when we did the assessments that they were siloed and they did not take into consideration all the different areas. The interesting thing was that they really worked with very different data, and they only really rolled it up when it came to policy commissions, policy statements. So it was a natural silo, and so the maturity had to be done by silo and then operating at a different level. So it is to be aware of when you're focusing at your levels of assessment.
Okay. I just noticed, like, that there is an issue between the one that is producing the original data and the people working in the data warehouse. They have different perspective of things. As the data warehouse is consolidating data on the enterprise level, and the producing side is in the domain of operations, and they might consider that to have a good quality. But when you aggregate things and have not completely defined a common definition of what the source data is, and then you start causing issues.
Yeah.
And here there's two different groups that is working with data governance from different perspective, and they might not have the same interest.
Yeah. And I think so what I do like to do as well in that situation, Max, is to look at the maturity as the business sees it, rather than as the technical area. So remember, I had that diagram of where are we going to do the assessment? Are we going to do it from a business operations point of view, business structure point of view, or are we going to do it at a system point of view? And again, you come up with answers. You just need to know how to, when you interpret the results, you need to understand what is the impact that it's going to be, that's going to have on me, this lack of maturity or difference. I saw a really good representation once on maturity assessment where they said the range of maturity was as important to understand. So if I've got from a 0 to a 5, I've got very diverging levels of understanding of warehousing or data or master data. They actually used an indicator to say, you know, we're so far off of our common understanding of where we're at that itself is a risk. So and we did that. It was actually quite easy. What I did quickly was I used the Menti, and then I had these different groups that could answer, and I went across it, and we then measured the variation between the mins and the maxes. So almost what was the standard deviation gave me an answer there to it that I was looking for, and it's not just an average that you can assess. So your deviation also tells you how far out you are.
Good point.
Fantastic. Paul, I think we're just about on 2 hours now.
Yeah. I always knew this was going to spark a... so we need to look at that slide again of yours that says 55 minutes. But you didn't lie. That was the presentation. Then the rest came. Cast the bread on the water, and then the questions will come back at you. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. It's been brilliant. And I just see some of the great comments coming through. Great session, informative. First demo session was jam-packed of information. So everybody, thanks so much for participating. And yeah, just remember those dates weekly. We gather, we get together, we learn. And big thanks to Howard again. All the preparation I can see is just, it's incredible. Thank you. Thanks for the support and helping all of us learn. So thank you, everybody. Have a great evening and see you next week.
Paul, there was a question right at the end, and I'll just repeat it for those that they asked if the recording was going to be available and the deck. Just to make sure, guys, I will publish the entire deck. It tends to get to about 150 slides. Once all 4 have been done at the end of the month, we'll make the deck available.
Perfect.
Excellent.
We'll repeat that every week just to keep everybody up to speed. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Brilliant. Have a good evening. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.